The mind has never experienced this much relief. This is not something we experience on a day-to-day basis. You can't eat something and it gives you that kind of relief. You can't experience anything like this in like sleep, or it's a much deeper experience. It's the breaking apart of all conditions in the mind, and all these conditions are creating constant tension. And when that breaks apart, there is a really deep sense of relief, lightness. There is that sense of bliss, all pervasive. Mind is just really steady. When you let go of all these mental constructions, mind becomes so sharp because it has nothing impeding it. Bhante would say is like you let go of a very heavy burden. That's how it feels. Now you're wondering, and now what? Now we've been talking about all kinds of things, and everybody's making actually really good progress in the meditation. That's like my happiest moment in the retreat, when the meditation starts to pick up. And then everybody gets quite happy. And so we've been covering some basics for the past 3 days. This is day 4 of the retreat, for those of you who completely lost track of time and space and concepts and ideas. And usually this is a time that I found, usually day 4 is actually the day it starts to pick up a little bit more. And so once we cover these foundations, like really getting down the 6 R's, and then talking a little bit more about the upliftment of the mind and how to use the smile and put the emphasis on that sequence, that really precious sequence from gladness to collectedness, understanding how that process works. And then a little bit of groundwork about distractions, papancha, how it works, how it comes up, and how to not take it personal. Usually that's a good start, and things lighten up. And usually the next step, because now a lot of people have started experiencing very similar states in the meditation, where the loving kindness is starting to get more established and lighter, and the body is becoming also lighter, and the meditation is starting to change for a lot of people right now. And this is the time where I like to give the roadmap, because now a lot of people are wondering, this is all really nice, this is a really beautiful meditation, loving kindness, the 6 R's, but where is it going, and what's the deal here? Because I said this is a dynamic meditation, and I said it would be changing quite a bit, and now it is starting. And so tonight we'll be exploring the roadmap of meditation and the different stages of the meditation. When I was looking around for answers in my own practice, because I was having a hard time, and also I couldn't understand what the Buddha talked about when he talked about Jhāna, the big word. And I have to put a disclaimer on this talk. This is a highly controversial talk. And so just so you know, if you know a little bit about classical Theravada Buddhism, then this is not the way that it's being interpreted, just so you know, usually. It's being interpreted in different ways, but usually when we speak about jhana, we speak about absorption, concentration, one-pointed kind of samadhi practices, samatha, in the usual context. But for me, I couldn't understand really how that worked. It didn't make a whole lot of sense to me, so I'll keep that personal. This is my humble opinion. And when I found my teacher, he would use the Anupada Sutta, the Majjhima Nikaya 111, and it's one by one as they occurred. And that was his, like, one of his favorite suttas in the canon. And he would go through each of the jhanas with the Brahma Viharas and explaining his understanding of it. And when he gave that talk, I was sold. When I watched that talk, it made so much sense. And now I felt like I could finally understand what the Buddha is talking about. And so for me, this has always been a very important talk. This is a talk I really like to share also at the right time of the retreat, because it really opens up doors and it can really help us understand where this meditation is going and what is happening in the mind. But at the same time, when we give the map, then it's easy for people to start, I say people, but it's easy for us to start trying to make that happen. And I just want to say, the map is the map. It's not the journey. The map is showing you what it kind of looks like when you look at a topographic map. And then you look at the terrain in front of you. It's not the same. There's like a bunch of lines and kind of blue streams and things like that. And then what you see is like a huge valley and, like a crag and a lake, and you can't really see what's on the corner. So the practice is the same. The only thing you have to worry about is your vehicle of awareness, which is mostly Mettā for everybody now, and keep doing the 6 R's. And that's it. That is right effort. Samma vāyama. I like to call it wise practice. And once you do right effort is the vehicle. Right effort is the legs. It's the action. In a sentence, it's the verb. So right effort is what we do. Right effort is the vehicle that is driving us on the path. So that's the journey. That's what we do. Then I will talk a bit more about the Eightfold Path later on the retreat. But as we do right effort, awareness arises. Mindfulness arises on its own because the mind becomes very wholesome. And so I like to say that actually awareness or mindfulness is a byproduct of right effort. Because nowadays we think that mindfulness is a practice, but actually right effort is the practice. Mindfulness comes after it. And so this is a very important distinction. And what happens next is, as we do right effort, mindfulness will arise and the mind will go through different stages of release. And that's the roadmap. And just so the roadmap is not what we do. The roadmap is just telling us what to expect, how to get a bearing, and what is awaiting around the corner for us. And that's helpful because when, for example, we don't know that the Mettā has to become lighter, it has to become thinner, lighter, more easier to maintain, not as strong. Strong Mettā is not the right direction. Steady Mettā is the right direction. Light Mettā, open Mettā is the right direction. So when we just know that, we know that we shouldn't trying to force the Mettā more, because that'll just bring us into a dead end. But we want to actually go further and relax deeper and let that Mettā be purified. If I say that on day one, it's not going to work because there's not enough steadiness for the Mettā to be experienced like this. The mind needs to really calm down for at least 3 days, usually 3 to 4 days. And so it's just for these little things that it's good to know what to expect so that we can actually go in the right direction and not kind of get lost or hit a wall. But in the end, the roadmap is just a map. And so we just use it skillfully to go in the right direction. And I like this little quote by Jaya Ashmore. And she says, if we try too much to count and name every sensation that we feel, the meditation will be dry and not sustainable. But when we allow ourselves to accept that the life we are in the middle of living is more like an ecosystem in our care, then we could begin. We could be beginners. Being a beginner could be fun. Beginners at listening. And I would say that this is the right attitude towards the map and towards the meditation. So the meditation and cultivating wholesome states is our ecosystem. And we just want to not try to make it happen, but just be beginners and have fun and keep it light. I studied to be an adventure guide, adventure tourism, and so so technically my profession is to lead people outdoors in like canoeing and trekking and climbing and all these things. And I feel like it's kind of similar now. It's just instead of being outwards, it's inwards. So, and I like to compare this path. I used to do a lot of really long, extensive canoe expedition up northern Quebec in Canada, where I'm from. And we would go out for these 30 plus days long expeditions in really remote northern, like Quebec is like rivers that flow into the Arctic Ocean, pretty much. Really beautiful, pristine, barren landscapes with like tundra and, you know, untouched landscapes. We would spend like weeks just preparing, dehydrating all of our food and, you know, cooking and packing everything up and take the train all the way to like way up north Quebec and then drop the canoes off the train and start paddling. And this path really reminds me of a canoe expedition in some ways, because we first we start in our lives, we have all these things and we have to start from somewhere, and so we start in the busy city, and from the busy city the busy city in the meditation is the city of the senses. And so when we come on retreat, then we're actually packing up and leaving the busy city of the senses. And so I'll be reading from a sutta. It's in the middle length discourses, Majjhima Nikāya. It's number 59, the many kinds of feelings, or the plurality of felt experiences. And this is a teaching that is found in more than one Nikāya, pretty much identical. And when that happens, that's usually a sign that the Buddha actually taught that quite a lot. Because each collection has, and this is more for the nerds, I guess, poly nerds. So when you find a sutta that comes back over and over into different collections, these collections were said to come from different schools, different people. For example, the Samyutta Nikāya is said to be from Ānanda, Venerable Ānanda, and the Anguttara Nikāya technically is said to be from Mahakassapa, Bhante. Anyhow, they were put together. But when we see a teaching coming or in more than one of these collections, it's a good sign. So, and this is the case for that sutta. And so the Buddha starts and says, Ānanda, there are these 5 kinds of sensory distractions. What 5? Forms perceived by the eye, which are desirable, loved, seductive and enticing, mingled with desire and enticing. Sounds perceived by the ear, odors perceived by the nose, flavors perceived by the tongue, tangibles perceived by the body, which are desired, loved, seductive and enticing, mingled with desire and exciting. These are the 5 kinds of sensory distractions. The happiness and delight that arises rooted upon these 5 kinds of sensory distractions, this is called the happiness of desires. I like to write in brackets, bottomless desires. And so the thing is that there is definitely a kind of happiness that can arise from these things. And that's why I started with talking about the busy city. And this kind of happiness it exists, and it's real, and it's not necessarily that to say that a good meal shouldn't be enjoyed, or whatever good happens in your life in terms of material aspects and whatnot, it's not to be rejected or anything. But to say that this is real, meaningful, and deep, and secure, and safe happiness, then that might be problematic. And so, just so you get an idea, here the Buddha talked about 5 senses, but the jhanas, the levels of meditation, are part of the 6th sense, which is the mind. And so basically what he's saying is that these 5 senses are quite coarse, and if we just find happiness in that, then it's not that good actually. There's a lot higher than this. And then he goes into the mind, and then mental development and the levels of meditation. And so how to find happiness by cultivating the mind. And what is that other kind of happiness? And this is where we start to paddle. Letting go of all sensory engagement, letting go of unwholesome mental states, still attended by thinking and reflection, with the blissful happiness born of letting go, one understands and abides in the first level of meditation. So here in the first level of meditation, there is more of an active principle. There is what we call vitakka vichara, which is thinking and perhaps reflection, or even imagining, visualization. That is all happening within the realm of the first level of meditation. Letting go of all sensory engagement. So you come on retreat, you come and sit down, you close your eyes, you let go of all the world. Basically for that time, you start radiating loving kindness or feeling loving kindness inside of your heart, letting go of unwholesome mental states. You are, by doing this, de facto, you are letting go of unwholesome states. And so you've let go of all the senses, you let go of unwholesome states. Of course, this is not like a cut clean breakthrough. So unwholesome states are going to come, the distractions are going to come, and it's going to pull you out of this really quickly, actually, at the beginning. And keep repeating, keep smiling, keep remembering a happy memory, keep remembering even your spiritual friend that is part of a visualization, imagination, just so that we can break through, punch out of any kind of unwholesome states that are accumulated. So by doing this continually, this is the first level. We are headed in that way. And there's a lot of paddling involved. We're paddling counter current because our mind is used to go down to the city. So at this point, it's a more active meditation. So there is going to be a little bit of paddling, uplifting the mind, really recollecting. And that's okay, that's good. And there is also a letting go that is happening with the 6 R's. With the blissful happiness born of letting go, viveka jam piti sukham, that's the Pali. And as we start to break away from the senses and accumulated unwholesome states, and this could just be, closing your eyes and feel how good that feels. Because our eyes, actually our brain is, I can't remember how many percent of the brain is used for visual consciousness, but it's a lot. And just by closing your eyes, you can actually feel quite a bit of relief. Of course, it's not just that, but that's an example. And so if you actually let go of all the senses, you can feel quite a bit of relief just doing that. And so there's a natural bliss and happiness that comes from that. The senses are quite heavy on the mind. They are actually really dense for our consciousness. And so to cut away from them is lightening up our minds quite a lot. It's just at the beginning we just don't know what to do with it. Our mind is just really active anyway, so we don't really notice, but it does have a big impact. And so here we just do this with the loving kindness and the visualizations. And this is that other kind of happiness, which is beyond and more exalted. When one abides meditating in this way, and now I'm kind of mixing another little teaching in here. One's awareness and perception becomes invaded and filled with sensory gratification. So the senses and the distractions are still going to come through. They're still going to come. But as we develop the right understanding and we practice right effort, then we gradually will let go of them. Even though they will still come in and pull us out, but we just siksar. Just as if pain were to arise for one who was happy, that would be known as a disturbance. Similarly, when one's awareness and perception becomes invaded by sensory gratification, one feels it as a disturbance. So this is wisdom. By this line of reasoning, friend, it can be understood that Nibbāna is happiness. So here we have this quite important term, which can be interpreted in many different ways, but here clearly the Buddha is using it as just a way to say that when we let go of these things, it's a mini kind of Nibbāna. And so we are practicing to allay and calm down and extinguish the fire in the mind slowly, slowly. So even on the first level of meditation, we're speaking of a small Nibbāna. Ānanda, those who say this is the highest peace, happiness and delight that can be experienced, I do not agree with them. Because Ānanda, there is another kind of happiness beyond this and more exalted. What is this other kind of happiness? Here, Ānanda, with the calming of thinking and reflection, with inner tranquilization, one's mind becomes unified without thinking and reflection, with the blissful happiness born of mental collectedness or mental unity. See how it's interesting? In the first level of meditation, the Buddha does not even talk about collectedness of mind. It's only coming up in the second one. And so the first one is a little bit active, as I said. But the second one, we start to see a much more grounding and unifying of consciousness of the mind. And so I like to compare that to arriving to a lake. So we're arriving into this beautiful mountain lake. It's kind of steep walls on each side, but it's very unified. And it's becoming more calm. And so the chattering, the thinking, the visualizing, the imagining, that will start to move away. And so that is another important place where we want to actually understand that to always bring up an object, to bring up the Mettā, is not better. We use the object, we use the imagination, we use the visualization to bring up the feeling. It has a purpose. But once the feeling is there, you will notice that actually the mind delights more without the thinking. It's even better to just glide on the feeling of Mettā without thinking. Of course, your spiritual friend, you can know that they're there, but you're not going to be trying to imagine them or think or say anything unless you feel that the feeling kind of drops down at the beginning, first couple of days, 3 days, sometimes the feeling goes down and you can bring it back up with, thinking of your spiritual friend again, see them smile, and then the feeling goes back up again, and then you just continue without even thinking, you just be with the feeling. And the current, the white water of thinking, of thoughts, and of all this mental activity, now it calms down, it levels out, and it becomes unified in that beautiful lake. That's another simile or analogy that I like for mental collectedness, is that the pooling of awareness. All the 6 streams that I talked about yesterday, when they when they start flowing back towards the mind, then there's that pooling that happens, and the mind becomes like a beautiful mountain lake. And so this is where we can start to experience that. And this is that other kind of happiness, which is beyond and more exalted. When one abides meditating in this way, one's awareness and perception become invaded by thinking. See, now the disturbance is always the step earlier. Now when thinking arises in the mind, it's felt as like, yeah, that's not as good. I'd rather just float. Just glide. So it is seen as a disturbance, something painful. By this line of reasoning, friend, it can be understood that Nibbāna is happiness. So as we let that go, we let go of that thinking, we're moving away of more mental activities and coarser mental qualities towards a more released kind of awareness. Ānanda, those who say this is the highest peace, happiness and delight that can be experienced, I do not agree with them. Because Ānanda, there is another kind of happiness beyond this and more exalted. What is this other kind of happiness? Here, Ānanda, with the calming of stronger joy, abiding in mental steadiness, present and fully aware, experiencing happiness within one's body, or ease within one's body. That state which the Aryas described as steady presence of mind, this is a pleasant abiding. One understands and abides in the third level of meditation. In our canoe expedition, I like to compare this as paddling this newfound lake, which is really calm, and we start to have this light breeze in our back. And so the paddle gets quite easy there, and there's quite a lot of mental steadiness. And so, whereas before we were paddling upstream, it was a bit of a struggle. Now it's like breezy. There's that steadiness in the mind, and it's easy. It's an easy paddle. And then we're starting to experience that, yeah, that steadiness of mind is a happy place. It's actually even better than all the other stages before. This steadiness of mind or steady presence, what I call steady presence, is what is usually called upekkha, so equanimity. I prefer to call it steadiness of mind. And so the more excited joy that was necessary in the first two steps here calms down. Joy, the stronger joy, actually is important at the beginning to purify the mind. It's like the cleansing agent of the mind. That's what I call. That's what I like to call joy. It's like the scrubbing agent of the mind. And when we, at the beginning, we'll have a lot more joy because we're detaching from all these unwholesome states, and the joy is stronger. It's felt throughout. It can be felt throughout the body, the smile. Although it can be a much more up and down roller coaster kind of feeling, where we have these peaks of really stronger joy that kind of cleanse the mind, and then we get distracted, and it's really kind of, it's not very steady. But at some point, the joy really kind of smooths out the mind. And this is that place. And at this place, the stronger joy isn't as necessary. So it doesn't disappear, but it calms down. It becomes more mature, more steady. And this is always experiencing loving kindness. And so the loving kindness that you're experiencing will be influenced by these factors, by these qualities also. So the metta won't be as strong also. It will be more mature. It will calm down. And this is actually what we want. This is what we're looking for. We're not, when that happens, sometimes people will think, oh, I'm losing the metta. I should bring it up again. But actually, no. It's actually becoming more mature, more easily sustained. And so that's the right way. Ekatamai. When one abides meditating in this way, one's awareness and perception becomes invaded and filled with stronger joy. See, the factors of the previous state still come in once in a while. Of course it comes in. This is never a clean-cut break and there's this state and then all of a sudden everything is different and there's the other state. That's not how it works. It comes in, it comes out, and the mind gets used to these states and it tunes into it, and then it starts to get steady in that state. Just as if pain were to arise for one who was happy, that would be known as a disturbance. And so when that coarser or that stronger excited joy comes, sometimes it's needed to purify the mind, but the mind will more and more delight in that really blissful stillness, calmness of mind. And that's where it actually will want to stay longer now, because it's actually better than joy. By this line of reasoning, friend, it can be understood that Nibbāna is happiness. So we're moving away from coarser mental qualities always. Ānanda, those who say this is the highest peace, happiness and delight that can be experienced, I do not agree with them. Because Ānanda, there is another kind of happiness beyond this and more exalted. Here Ānanda, unattached to pleasant experiences, unsteered by unpleasant ones. We're not affected by unpleasant experiences anymore. As mental excitement and heaviness settles, one's mind is balanced, purified by unmoving presence. One understands and abides in the fourth level of meditation. And now, at this point, the mind becomes very, very level, very detached. Pleasant experiences, unpleasant experiences, it's kind of gone beyond that. It's not judging, it's not conceptualizing about these things. That place is so much more relieving and blissful in a very calm and peaceful way that there's no these imbalances of the mind of like really strong joy and down and up, and it's all leveled out, and it's really enjoying that steadiness. And I like to compare that as just paddling in the middle of this beautiful mountain lake that is like crystal clear. The Buddha called this state the beautiful. Subham. In some teachings, he will call this fourth level of meditation the beautiful, Subham. I like to kind of understand it as, you know, when you see something beautiful and you're really inspired by it, like in nature or whatever it is, or like if you go to the Sri Dalada Marigawa or at the Temple of the Tooth in Kandy, or I don't know, wherever you find beauty in this world. That level of meditation is just like experiencing that beauty, like continuous. It's just so good, and very calm, not excited. And those who say this is the highest peace, happiness and delight that can be experienced, I do not agree with them. Because there is another kind of happiness beyond this and more exalted. And so of course now the loving kindness So in one of his teachings, it's a more advanced exposition on the Brahma Viharas, the four divine abodes: loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and calm or equanimity. In that teaching, he really kind of breaks it all down and tells, this is how to really do it properly, and it's quite lengthy, so I'm not going to launch into that. But in that more advanced teaching, he says that loving kindness cannot go beyond this one, cannot go beyond this anymore, because loving kindness is too strong of a feeling, even though it's really wholesome. And at this point, it's very, very, very light, very light. It cannot be brought further. So here another check mark or landmark is the Mettā will start to go. And it's not going to be like you're experiencing an unwholesome state. It's just actually replaced by a higher Brahma Vihara, or a higher, more elevated, lighter state, which is also radiant. And whenever you experience this in your meditation, that is normal. You want to actually let it go. And you might start to notice that this distant Mettā, this distant loving kindness, is also, it has a little bit of a feeling of compassion. It might feel, not everybody sees that, but it might feel like that distant loving kindness feels a bit more like a very light sense of compassion. And that's why we have this progression through the Brahma Viharas. But not everybody sees that. It's not mandatory. It's good to keep it simple too. Here, Ānanda, leaving behind all perceptions of form, with the fading away of sensory awareness, turning away from the perception of plurality, aware of endless space. One understands and abides in the plane of endless space. And so here what happens is that you'll probably remember a time maybe that I said, so do you feel like there's parts of your body that kind of disappear, or you feel like your body is there but it's kind of in the background? It's not like the mind isn't really paying attention to it anymore. The mental collectedness is getting quite stronger. And so this is that place. So the body is complicated. We have these fingers and all of these limbs and all of these sensations, and so much stuff going on. It's like another busy city, even though it's a lot, I guess it's a smaller city, but it's full of things happening all the time. And as we release and relax all coarser perceptions, and the mind starts to float on really high, wholesome states, the mind will be very collected, unified, and really not interested in the body anymore. It's not going to pay attention. It's not going to be interested. And so that's also normal. So we don't try, sometimes we say the Mettā moves up to the head. The Mettā doesn't really move up to the head, but the mind becomes very collected. The body is kind of not really interesting so much anymore for the mind. And the Mettā is just bright and radiant here. And this is where also it changes to kind of a detached feeling of light compassion. And I like to compare this as coming to an opening. So we were in an enclave, kind of a beautiful mountain lake, but at the end of the lake, it opens up. And we have this huge and vast territory of this like pristine, beautiful landscape. The reason why this is experienced, the vastness, the endless space, that feeling, technically these two things come really closely together, mind and body, nama rupa. But the mind itself, it doesn't have a body. And so when it becomes released from bodily awareness, the first thing it experiences is, it's vast, it's huge, it's endless. This could be felt as like a kind of a sense of expansion in your mind. Like sometimes you'll be meditating, you'll be feeling the loving kindness, it's going to become collected. And then you'll feel like some kind of an expansion with a light, loving kindness or compassion. It could be felt as just a sense of really wide open kind of space. And the reason for that is that mind is breaking free from that container. And mind doesn't have a container. Mind is mind. Mind is that thing. I like to compare it to, at this point, it's like a beautiful crystal, clear crystal. And the mind is, there's definitely a center, it's unified somewhere in that's the crystal. But the light shines through. And it's also luminous, and it's also radiant. So the mind is just, it's not concentrated. It's that beautiful crystal, and the light shines through it. So it's both unified but also radiant. So these two qualities that are kind of, because often we think, well, if it's radiant, then it's just like lost in space kind of thing. But no, it also has a kind of a center at this point. Okay, enough of endless space. This is a big transition phase, and that's usually when I notice that a few people are around there, that's when I'll be giving this talk, so that there's a lot more clarity on what's going on and the path. Technically, you don't really need to know until that moment where you are. And even further, you wouldn't really need to know, really, but it can be quite useful to orient yourself. When one abides meditating in this way, one's awareness and perception become invaded by form, bodily awareness. So sometimes people will try to also, because they're not used to that new phenomena, they're like, oh, I'm losing the Mettā, I should come back and feel the Mettā in my heart. No, actually it's a good thing. You just want to, don't worry. Don't worry about body. Just let it shine. And that's good, that's the right direction. By this line of reasoning, friend, it can be understood that Nibbāna is happiness. So even perception of the body, you just let it go. This is coarser. We're not interested. Ānanda, those who say this is the highest peace, happiness, and delight that can be experienced, I do not agree with them. Because Ānanda, there is another kind of happiness beyond this and more exalted. Here, Ānanda, leaving behind the plane of endless space, aware of endless consciousness, one understands and abides in the plane of endless consciousness. So it's a little bit less descriptive, this one. But the description is just in the name of that state. So it's becoming so vast and so, at the same time, very simple and simplified and purified that there's not a whole lot of stuff going on anymore. It's just a little bit of a different shift in perception. And so from that vastness, when the mind starts to sink, settle into that vastness, it'll start to get used to it, and it's just get, okay, I'm vast. And it's not really going to think about that anymore. And then it'll go deeper and deeper into that releasing process, and consciousness will start to witness itself. So the way that it's actually always active, it's endless consciousness. Consciousness is arising and passing, little tiny trillions of little bits of consciousnesses always passing, always arising and passing. There's always a little seed in it. There's always something that kind of sparks. It's like a little spark. It's like a fire. Consciousness is like a fire. We think it's one thing, but it's actually moving, and it's changing shape, and it's got trillions of little particles in it, just moving. And if you look at a candle really close, you can kind of see them, these little dots. Consciousness is just the same. Our minds become so clear and still that we're able to see that now. The active principle of consciousness, it's always arising. And in our canoe expedition, this is like arriving at all of the lake's tributaries. So the lake is fed by all these tiny little streams. But this is just the flow of consciousness. It's not the coarser flow of, those full-fledged distractions anymore. But it always comes up with stuff. And it's smaller, it's thinner. It's not that big flow anymore. And we're getting closer and closer to the very source of the river, the source of the water, the source of awareness, the source of consciousness. So this is getting quite interesting. And we start to realize that consciousness is also fabricated. It comes up through causes and conditions. This is a place where in the meditation, mainly there will be only lighter joy, a lighter radiant joy. And joy goes deeper than loving kindness and deeper than compassion because it is lighter. It's so simple. Joy is just really, really simple. It's not that stronger joy as before, it's that really delicate, really bright, light joy. And whatever you have at this point, you just keep shining it. Don't try to figure out, is it compassion, is it loving kindness, is it joy? Just let it calm down, let it become lighter, and just radiate that. Don't make it complicated. At this point, some people see kind of like flickering of consciousness. That's possible. This is also a place where I'll be asking, do you get distracted less than at least the first few days? And then they'll say, yeah, but no. Because when we see how active the mind is, we think we're still active and we're having these distractions, but it's actually, awareness is just much sharper and much clearer. So these are not full-fledged distractions anymore. We're just seeing way deeper into the mind. So these are not full-fledged distractions, but a kind of a noticing of that activity, that natural activity of consciousness. And so it's not to be made a big deal out of. Sometimes people think that they're actually not practicing well anymore because it's really they think it's really active. But actually just keep relaxing. It's okay. Just let it go. Let it flow, and at some point the bucket will empty out. This is that other kind of happiness which is beyond this and more exalted. When one abides meditating in this way, one's awareness becomes invaded and filled by the awareness of endless space. And so again, there will be this kind of movement, expansion, contraction a little bit again, and then as you relax, the mind is not used to this new territory, so it's kind of an exploration. You'll release and relax and then notice some different qualities in the mind, and then mind will become coarse a little bit again, and then it will expand again, and then it will notice the consciousness. And so that's just how it is. By this line of reasoning, friend, it can be understood that Nibbāna is happiness. Those who say this is the highest peace, happiness and delight that can be experienced, I do not agree with them. It doesn't stop here. Because Ānanda, there is another kind of happiness beyond and more exalted. Here Ānanda, leaving behind the plane of endless consciousness, aware of nothing in particular. That's a funny one. One understands and abides in, I call it the plane of bare awareness, or the plane of nothingness. And so here mind is, when I said the bucket would empty out, well, this is the empty bucket. This is where it gets to. At some point, the mind just empties out all of its activity to a level where there is only that beautiful, clear, bright, still, sharp awareness. Awareness of what? Of awareness. It's not really aware of anything in particular, it's just aware. And that's it. In the meditation, this is where there is another kind of a transition phase. It's not exactly clear when exactly all these happen. There will be nuances, but this is where we, the joy, the radiant joy will really calm down into this like radiant poise. This really nice, radiant equanimity, poise, steadiness. And as it stabilizes, it will let go of any kind of desire to radiate anything. And this is the right place where we can actually stop radiating. The Brahma Viharas are done. This is as far as it goes. The plane of bare awareness or nothingness, this is the limit of upekkha, of equanimity, radiant equanimity. And the thing about the Brahma Viharas is that there is a slight volition behind them. And that volition of being radiant, of doing that motion, even if it's really, really calm and peaceful, still has that tinge of, I'm doing something. I'm making that happen. And so at that time, the mind will just want to let go of that radiance, and it will just stand there, like effortlessly. And why now does it stand there without doing anything? Because we have done the whole path before to bring it there. We've cultivated the stand of the mind, and now it can just actually rest because it's really, really, really wholesome. And this will happen usually after, this starts to happen mostly after an hour and a half to 2 hours at least of meditation. So that's why from now on, I will start suggesting to extend your sits. And this is a good time because everybody's starting to be more familiar and more settled. And of course, I'm never going to ask you to do anything you're not comfortable of doing. That's not the point. In the end, you decide. It's not. I'm not you. I'm not. This is your life. But I just know that after this point, then the meditation needs to extend a little bit. Because there is no magic, unfortunately. I forgot my magic wand. Just making people entering jhana. No, that's not how it works. And so there's no magic. The mind needs time to settle, to smooth out. And there's just no other way that it can do that by spending time in stillness, in release, continuously. And so without rushing anything, I'll say, well, you know, if you can try to extend 15 minutes your meditation, just before you break your sit, look at your mind. What is your mind doing? You might notice that just before you're gonna stand up, there's a little bit of impatience, like this, and it goes like, I really need to stand up. And it comes with tension. And you can actually just siksara that and relax. Allow yourself to just relax for another 15 minutes and smile. See what happens. And also, this is where I usually encourage people to never sit through don't sit through pain, like physical pain. If you want to sit in a chair, please do so. Put as many cushions you need, it doesn't matter. What you can do if you have like a medical condition or like even just, you know, some pain in your body naturally, you can alternate. You can put a chair right behind you, and if you like the cushion, you can sit on the cushion for as long as you want to do it. And then if you actually want to try to extend your sits, well, just stand up, sit in the chair, like right behind you. Just that amount of movement won't be enough to really disturb your meditation that much. And see what happens. If you can sit for another half an hour, then that's really good. You'll see your mind will go deeper. So really, when we start to sit longer, it's really good to make sure that we're not trying to force ourselves, that it's not going to be painful. And also, we want to make sure that we increase the amount of walking a little bit. Because of course, if we sit longer, we won't walk as often. So we need to walk longer a little bit, just to get the body moving. This will help a lot with pain in the first place. And so I like to see this is what we call the clear mind or the still mind. When I say, were you with the still mind, that's actually what I'm referring to. It's exactly that level of meditation. I like to, in our analogy of the canoe expedition, I like to see it as, this is the Tundra. This is the very pristine, barren landscape, which is pure and untouched. It still has some small, tiny streams. And what happens in these long canoe expeditions, one thing that I learned is that all of the continents and all of the terrain and countries, you know, there's always mountains, ridges, and of course waterfalls. It flows down the ridges, and then it gathers in the middle, in the valley, and then there's always a river in the middle of the valley. And so this is kind of where we are. But in terms of countries, it's the same thing. So the water that falls right in the middle of Canada, for example, well, it's going to flow somewhere. It's going to be a long way to somewhere, but it's going to flow somewhere. And the water that flows in the water that falls in the middle of Russia or whatever, like huge continent, it's still going to go somewhere, because whether we see it or not, there's always a slope. There's always a way it's going to go to. And there are these areas that are defined, these ridge lines that kind of divide continents. So, like, for example, in Quebec, Quebec is like a big thing like this, and it's got, the way that it's kind of divided is that all the water that falls here will flow this way. All the water that falls in this particular area will flow this way. All the water that falls in this particular area will flow this way. And these are called drainage divide. And so I like to, because of our, on canoe expeditions, we would actually go upstream for a long time, and we would get to these drainage divides where when you reach that, all the water that flows from that ridge south will flow south. And then when you cross over, you bring your canoe and you can't paddle, there's no water anymore, you just have to cross that ridge. And then on the other side, the water flows north, flows the other way. And so, and these can be quite massive, these drainage divide areas. And so here, we are getting closer and closer and closer to the source, the drainage divide, where there's no more water. And so here is very, is that great clarity, and it's like also we're like having this really beautiful sunset, and the mind is really collected, and it's really beautiful and clear. Whenever one abides meditating in this way, one's awareness becomes invaded by perception of endless consciousness. So the activity of the mind will sometimes kick again in. So the mind will become again a little bit more active, have these little micro tiny thoughts, and then, oh yeah, we'll see that as a distraction now, and we'll just release and relax. The stillness is so much better. That beautiful clarity. And by this line of reasoning, it can be understood that Nibbāna is happiness. Ānanda, those who say this is the highest peace, happiness, and delight that can be experienced. I do not agree with them. The Buddha really found something pretty good, it seems like. Because Ānanda, there is another kind of happiness beyond this and more exalted. Okay. Here, Ānanda, leaving behind the plane of bare awareness, one understands and abides in the plane between awareness and its limit. And so here, usually in the canoe expedition, the small streams will become so tiny, and you don't even know where they're flowing to. It's like, and what I would do is I would like take some pieces of grass and I would throw it in, and like kind of watch where it's flowing, because you just can't tell. It's like a big marsh. And this is the same kind of place. At this point, it's like we're actually learning to let go of awareness itself. And so that's really quite profound. And so that's not in all teachings that you hear that. Actually, this is knowledge special to the Buddhas. Nibbāna. We're getting closer to what that means, Nibbāna. And at this point, we notice that actually in awareness itself, even the most purified, clear, still, light awareness, there is actually tension. Even in that awareness itself. And then we start to really understand that and see that little bit by little bit. applying the Four Noble Truths. Yes, awareness has that little tension, brings that little tension. And then we just let go, release, step out of the picture. This is the last bastion of me, I. Of all of the 5 constituents of ourselves, consciousness or awareness is the one that we associate the most with, this sense of I. This is the last place. We've let go of the body, we've let go of all these activities in the mind. Now there's this clear awareness, but still there's I. I see, I am aware, I am. But the Buddha's teaching doesn't stop at I am. It goes beyond that. When one abides meditating in this way, one's awareness and perception become invaded with bare awareness. So when awareness itself kind of breaks apart and it becomes released, I will be giving a talk on dependent origination later this retreat, maybe in a couple of days, Paticca Samuppada. And we will actually go quite deep into that process of how the mind is fabricated and how it breaks apart and becomes unconditioned. Just on a light note. But here when we start to let go of consciousness itself, of awareness itself, that relief is actually quite substantial. And when awareness, it will break apart, and the activities in the mind will be so light and far apart and just kind of broken up, that it will kind of have this sense of like release, like complete release. But then it will come back in again. And then this like, hey, I'm here. Like I'm here. I. It's like what it's kind of repeating. It's the mantra of bare awareness is I. I am beingness. But more and more we will start to see to let go of that is even more blissful. So to break down the compactness. By this line of reasoning, friend, it can be understood that Nibbāna is happiness. And so now we're starting to really get close to that Nibbāna. Ānanda, those who say this is the highest peace, happiness and delight that can be experienced, I do not agree with them. Why is that? Because Ānanda, there is another kind of happiness beyond this and more exalted. Here Ānanda, leaving behind the plane between awareness and its limit, neither perception or non-perception, that's also sometimes how it's called. One understands and abides in the release from perceptual awareness. So this is Sanya Vedayita Nirodha. So that complete release from all perceptual awareness. It just blows out like a lamp. How consciousness was like a flame earlier, and now it's gotten lighter and lighter and lighter and lighter, and then it just blows out. And the mind has never experienced this much relief. This is not something we experience on a day-to-day basis. You can't eat something and it gives you that kind of relief. You can't sleep you can't experience anything like this in like sleep, or it's a much deeper experience. It's the breaking apart of all conditions in the mind, and all these conditions are creating constant tension. And when that breaks apart, there is a really deep sense of relief and lightness. And when consciousness comes back online, there's that great relief. There's that sense of bliss, all pervasive, mind is just really steady, ultra HD, ultra 4K. It's seeing, sometimes you might look at like a leaf or something in nature, and you might see it like you've never seen it before. Like you'll see all the little lines in it and all the little really intricate patterns. And if you look at a bug or something, I mean, this is just an external kind of manifestation, but this is because the mind is, when you let go of all these mental constructions, mind becomes so sharp because it has nothing impeding it. So when consciousness blows out, and then there's nothing experienced there. The Buddha said you can't experience that because it's beyond experience. You're only aware of this when you come back, when consciousness kind of comes back online. And this is not going to last very long. The first time will not be very long. It will be like a blink of an eye. It's like you were there, and then feels like kind of things dissipating, and then boom, like you're kind of completely gone for a bit. And then this sense of like, everything was let go of. Bhante would say is like you let go of a very heavy burden. That's how it feels. And this is kind of the dry ground. This is our drainage divide. Now there's no more water. And when we come out of this state, I like to see it as we've gone all the way. We've seen how if we understand it in the proper way, we've seen how consciousness even itself is fabricated, and how it breaks apart. And how could that be me? How could there be a me in there? Like why I? This I comes with awareness. If there's no awareness, there's no I. And that the whole concept is actually insubstantial. And because of gradual training, you were able to go all the way there and experience that. And coming out of this, it's like crossing over that drainage divide. And now the water flows downwards to the north. And so all the previous time, the consciousness, we were kind of like paddling upstream, but now the paddle is downstream. And what the mind will delight more and more into is letting go, letting go, letting go, letting go. It won't want to keep it won't want to keep things with it. Of course it will get caught up sometimes, but more and more it will just delight into viveka, let go, letting go, letting go. And having seen with discernment, mental distractions are completely brought to an end. Any mental movements. By this line of reasoning, friend, it can be understood that Nibbāna is happiness. Then the Venerable Sariputta, this is a remix. So this is actually another sutta. We're talking about Sariputta here. Then the Venerable Sariputta exclaimed to the monks, Nibbāna is blissful, friends, Nibbāna is blissful. And when this was said, Venerable Udayi asked, what is the reason why, Venerable Sariputta, it is said to be blissful when there's nothing experienced there? When nothing is felt, how can you say that this is blissful? There's nothing. That exactly is why it is blissful, friend. Because there is nothing experienced or nothing felt. So some people might say that the Buddha speaks of the end of perceptual awareness and declares it as happiness. it can be said, friend, that the awakened one does not declare only pleasant sensations as partaking of happiness. But in this way, wherever one goes, happiness is found because the mind is free, it is liberated. And this mind is always in bliss, always happy. Whether here or there, this the truth finder, the Buddha, declares as true happiness. So this is it. So now you know the whole roadmap, all of the stages, what it looks like. And it's important to remember that this is not something that we do, this is something that happens. So the practice is the same, it doesn't matter. Really, you don't really need to know or think or try to understand where you are. It's just allow these words to sink into your mind, to make an impression. And perhaps maybe in your meditation at some point, you'll be doing something and then realizing, oh yeah, that's true, I should actually be letting go of that and not worrying about the Mettā being stronger, or you just let go and continue. But don't try to make it happen, it just happens on its own. So keep doing what you're doing, and everybody's doing great. I wish you all a very successful and beautiful meditation, and much happiness as we just discovered this is only getting better. So no worries. Okkoma Hondai Samtike. Okay. Okay, I release you. You are free. Let's share our merits, page 213. Let's release all beings. May suffering ones be suffering free, and the fear-struck fearless be. May the grieving shed all grief, and may all beings find relief. May all beings share these merits that we have thus acquired for the acquisition of all kinds of happiness. May beings inhabiting space and earth, devas and nagas of mighty powers, share these merits of ours. May they long protect the Buddha's dispensation. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.